Welcome back to Carolina Journal Radio. I'm Mitch Kokai. 2020 is shaping up to be a major election year. What are the races to watch? The top issues? Which voters could decide the tight races? Joining us to help answer those questions is a longtime observer of Tar Heel politics. John Hood is an author, syndicated columnist, and chairman of the John Locke Foundation. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Mitch.
So 2020 is going to be a huge year for Tar Heel politics. What are you going to be paying most attention to?
Possibly the number of times so-called political experts use the term hindsight is 2020. I think that's going to be one of the most pervasive phenomena in North Carolina politics, because foresight is going to be very far away from 2020. We saw in 2016 surprises in North Carolina electoral outcomes. We saw them in 2018. It is very possible we'll see something like that again in 2020. Just remember the context. In 2016, we had a U.S. Senator reelected, Republican Richard Burr. We had the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump win by a couple of 3 points. And we had Pat McCrory, the incumbent Republican governor, lose. But we had other Republican statewide elected officials do well, sometimes better than the candidates I just mentioned. What does that mean? That means, number one, there are some voters who only vote for president, or maybe president and senator, but they don't go all the way down the ballot. But that's not enough to explain it. It also means, and pardon me if you think this sounds like, Bigfoot hunting or something, but there are voters out there, possibly off in remote mountains or in sort of mysterious bogs somewhere in eastern North Carolina, who vote Democrat for some races and Republican for other races. There used to be a lot more of those kinds of split-ticket voters. There aren't as many. But when you have an equally divided state like North Carolina, which is one of the closest divided states as far as partisan affiliation in the country, then you're going to have a small but decisive number of ticket splitters, people who voted for, let's say, Roy Cooper and Donald Trump. There are such people. There were also people who voted for Hillary Clinton and Pat McCrory. I suspect there'll be enough of those ticket splitters in 2020 to generate a mixture of outcomes rather than a clean sweep for one side or the other. But I guess we'll see. Hindsight is 2020.
We'll get back to the ticket splitters in just a bit, but with all of the elections on the ballot, there's president, governor, a U.S. Senate seat, control of the General Assembly through all of those 170 legislative races, major court races on the ballot. What are going to be the one or two that you really focus most attention on?
Well, it's hard to ignore the top three races on the ballot. The presidential race is critical. Democrats hope to defeat Donald Trump. It wouldn't guarantee that outcome if they won North Carolina, but it would certainly make it very difficult for Donald Trump to be reelected without North Carolina. There's some other states, that Donald Trump needs that are harder gets than North Carolina, places like the battleground states of the Great Lakes region. If he's struggling to get North Carolina, he's probably not going to be president. The second thing, it's kind of a similar point, is the U.S. Senate race with Tom Tillis running for re-election. His Democratic opponents will either be Cal Cunningham, the former state senator, or Erica Smith, the current state senator. The Republicans currently have 53 seats in the U.S. Senate. If they win the presidency and thus keep the vice presidency, then they only need 50 seats to really control the chamber. If the Democrats win the White House, the Republicans would need 4 seats. They would need to not lose 4 seats, because if they went down to 49, obviously they'd no longer be a majority. Well, it's pretty easy to see if the Democrats are going to do well and really threaten Republican control of the United States Senate, it's easy to see 3 places where Republican incumbents would be in trouble: Maine, Colorado, and Arizona. These are places that wouldn't require very much interesting to happen, because those states have been trending blue much more than North Carolina has. You could see that happen. But that fourth seat for the Democrats is probably North Carolina. So the Tom Tillis race could be the tipping point in control of the U.S. Senate. That's number 2. Now, for North Carolinians, arguably the most important race is not the presidency or the Senate. Maybe I'm biased because I tend to focus on state policy, but I think the most consequential race for North Carolinians is the governor's race. We have a relatively weak governor in institutional power in North Carolina. It doesn't mean we have a weak governor. The governor still matters a great deal. Roy Cooper is running for re-election. His likely opponent is the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Forrest. This is a matchup people have been expecting for years, and absent a long-shot successful primary challenge to Dan Forrest by Holly Grange, a state representative, it'll be a Forrest-Cooper race. A Forrest-Cooper race in many ways typifies North Carolina politics. Both have been elected statewide multiple times. Both are talented in their own way. I suspect a tremendous amount of money will be spent on both sides. I think those are the key races to watch, but I also wouldn't be shocked if we even had a competitive congressional race or two.
We are chatting with John Hood, who is chairman of the John Locke Foundation, also a longtime observer of North Carolina politics. Earlier, you mentioned the importance of the ticket splitters who could really make a difference. As you see the Tar Heel politics and the way these particular races play out, what kinds of folks do you see as the potential ticket splitters?
Well, I won't be too oversimplified, but if you think about two different kinds of ticket splitters in North Carolina, let's say a Trump-Cooper voter in the rural area and a Clinton-McCrory voter in the urban area, in a Mecklenburg County, let's say. Let's say the other ticket splitter would be in Mitchell County, out in the mountains. Those ticket splitters who might vote for Roy Cooper and for Donald Trump again in 2020 might be people who were generally conservative. They feel more akin to the Republican than the Democratic Party, certainly at the national level. They at least dislike Trump's enemies, or they like Trump, or both. But with a Democrat in the governor's race, that doesn't scare them. They sort of feel like that Roy Cooper might be good on education or something like that. In the urban area, though, you might see a suburban-type voter in the suburbs of Raleigh, Cary, Charlotte, Greensboro, who doesn't like Donald Trump and isn't going to vote for him for president. But when you go down the ballot a little bit, they get nervous about tax increases that Democrats might institute. Certainly Roy Cooper has said things that would suggest he might want taxes to be bigger. They might like other policies that Republicans in the legislature have generally been following and are nervous about Roy Cooper's constant battles with the Republicans. And you could see a suburban voter vote for the Republicans in state races like governor or state senate or state house or something like that, but vote for whoever the Democratic nominee for president is. These are examples of the kinds of ticket splitters. Again, not very many, only a few percentage points of the North Carolina electorate, but enough to matter in a tight state.
With Donald Trump playing such a large role in national politics, how much are any of these candidates for any other races going to be able to get their message out with people paying attention to for or against Trump?
Well, if we're talking about broadcast ads bought in bulk, probably not very much, because I suspect the presidential races and the Senate races and to some extent the governor's races will buy all that time. But if you're running for some other council state race, or you're a voter who wants to find out about the legislative races, the congressional races, county commission races, I actually think you will get a lot of messaging. It just won't come in that form. It will come in your mailbox. In an interesting way, the internet age and the data revolution in politics has reinforced the value of old-fashioned direct mail as an effective targeted messaging device. As with email, Facebook ads, other kinds of digital messaging, even texting to your phones. I actually think there'll be lots of information for voters. If they want to pay attention, they can find out what they need. They just won't see it on the evening news on TV.
Well, one person who is certainly going to be paying attention as this moves forward is John Hood. He is an author, syndicated columnist. You can read his column a couple of times a week throughout much of North Carolina. Also the chairman of the John Locke Foundation. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.